Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for today's session with Aaron Mikulsky on Love to Lead. We're very excited. He's an alum of Roosevelt, recently published author, so we're very excited that he's joining us today to share some of the gems from his book. As I mentioned a little bit earlier and in the chat, we will be using menti.com today for some interaction outside of the Zoom meeting. So if possible, feel free to open that up in another browser or on your phone, whatever works easier. And also the code is there as well. And another friendly reminder, just please keep your mics muted during the hour, just for the best audio quality for everyone. And with that, I'd like to introduce our presenter, Aaron Mikulsky. Aaron is an accomplished senior executive and thought leader with more than 25 years of success across the insurance industry. He's also the founder of Love to Lead Consulting Services, and as I mentioned, the author of the book, Love to Lead, which is, oh, I don't know if you guys can see it. Oh, there's the cover. A journey of self-reflection, significance, and servant leadership. But I don't just want to read and retort Aaron's bio. I do want to share a little bit more about him. So in the spirit of leadership vulnerability, which is a theme in Aaron's book, I do want to share some information that I just pulled from his book as I was diving in, and I found really compelling. So Aaron, I hope you don't mind that I'm sharing this, but Aaron has had a long and really curious relationship with striving to understand the global economy, how companies have grown, how they have collapsed, and the stories behind those people who made all of that happen. And over the last 2 decades, Aaron has read over 1,000 books, which I think averages one a week. And that is such an impressive accomplishment on its own. And in his journey through those pages, he came to find that there's really similar stories, quotes, themes, etc., that are packaged in different ways to the reader. And what he has accomplished in Love to Lead is sharing some of the most important insights from his learnings over the year. So Aaron wrote Love to Lead in the midst of the pandemic, which was also alongside other worldly and national events. And in his book, Aaron argues that everyone is a leader, and he suggests that leading with love and putting the human first is extremely important. So Aaron, congratulations on your book, and thank you so much for being here today to share with us. I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that fine introduction, and hopefully everyone can see my screen. Like Christy said, I'm going to test out something and create some collaboration amongst ourselves today, so it's not just me speaking the whole time. So for those of you who are more visual learners, I just presented a summary of everything I'm going to speak to today in a very quick slideshow of pictures. So for those that may have to run off to a meeting or rush off to create something, solve a problem for one of our bosses, if you see this is really my executive summary right out of the gate. So I'm going to hit play here, and then we'll move on from there. Thank you. So there you have it. Before I jump in, The slide before you is really another depiction of who I am with different pictures. It's really different logos and brands of organizations that I've spent a lot of my time with. So think of this as your reputation. So it could be a nonprofit that you volunteer for, a religious organization, an academic institution, your company. Uh, really think of it as what makes up who you are today. And really, it's all these things before you that have made me who I am today. And it's really the people that I've met, the people I've interacted with, fought the battle, long, hard battles with, the organization's successes and failures that I've contributed to. It's really, our lives are really an amalgamation of the books we read, the way we spend our time, the people we spend our time with. And, I just want people to think kind of in that way. So, without getting into the whole litany and biography of my resume, this really summarizes it very quickly. And this is not about me at all. I want this to be a discussion of, like Christy said, what leadership means to me and how to get there. And quite frankly, before we all become better leaders, there's really no end goal. There is no point in which we check off all the boxes and like, okay, now I'm a leader, or I have this certain title now. That means I'm a leader. We've all probably worked for with people that have great titles and they sound great and everyone thinks, well, they're the leader because they have that positional power and that authority. However, as we go through and reflect on what is our definitions of leadership, many times we think, well, you know what, that's not the leader I aspire to be. And I strongly feel, and that's really the premise of the first part of my book, that before you really want to jump in and lead others effectively, you have to first lead yourself. And in order to lead yourself well, you need to reflect on some of the things here before you. So really spend a lot of time deeply and intentionally thinking about what are your personal values? What is really your purpose and meaning in life? Not just in the current state, but when you think back and reflect on what do you want your life to look like, your legacy, writing that epitaph while you're living now. What are you just innately, passionate about? And then what are your God-given strengths and your gifts? Some of the things that you're somewhat born with, that we're always working to sharpen the saw and improve. But if you think about this process, a lot of times people will hire a life coach and go through weeks and weeks or months or even years trying to better understand you, ourselves. Don't want to talk about too many philosophical things that Socrates said, highest being is to know thyself. And I come to find out with a lot of the most current recent studies about the brain, the mind, neurology, that we're not necessarily the best at understanding ourselves. So this isn't just an exercise either of us going out for a couple days, couple weeks, couple months, hanging out in Golden Pond or Walden Pond and being a hermit and doing all this deep thought. It's also very much about us asking others, especially the people closest to us, that sometimes may know us better in certain ways than we know ourselves, or we're all biased, right? We talk about that all the time, that we're all biased, even implicit biases, and sometimes think of ourselves in a very different light than others view us. So it's really getting to understand ourselves through that self-reflection, but also asking others and getting that very, very critical, sometimes brutal feedback from others. So as a part of this, it's really important for us all to individually define what success means to us. And when I've asked people and spoke with people in the past, they tend to fall within these different buckets here. So that's why I'm asking you guys to think about this. But if you just go into menti.com, so you can put that in your browser or your phone, your iPad, whatever, or and type in menti.com, you'll see the code and a place for the code. The code is 33865082. It's also at the top of this slide if you need to reference it. So if okay, we're starting to see the tallies come in. So as everyone votes, you'll see these change. It's like we're racing between the attainment of what we don't have and happiness. So again, it's menti.com and the code is 338652. All right. So I'm going to leave this up for a second and talk about this. But if anyone else chooses to vote or change your answer, you're more than welcome. So happiness has always been, when I ask this question, what people tend to say. And yet you look at society today, and a lot of what the media, social media, people tend to glamorize. It's people who have the title, who have the fortune, who have the fame, who have the power, who have the money, right? That's what gets the airplay. But the person who tends to live a rather quiet life, many times, not being on center stage, but really focusing on themselves that bring them the most joy, and then subsequently serving others and helping others and making other people better. See, look at this. I'm already speaking, and now people are changing their answers. So I'm already influencing decisions here. But no, I appreciate that. But really, what I want people to think about, and what I mentioned in the book, is to step back and reconsider what success means to you. And I make an argument in the book that actually success isn't about happiness, because I believe happiness is fleeting. And it seems like a lot of the things that bring people short-term happiness and ends up either drifting away, or then that next hurdle or goal is need to be reached in order to feel happy. So on a continuum, I view that joy is actually supersedes happiness. And I make the argument that it's really joy that's more about we, and about giving back, and about helping others in gratitude, than happiness, which tends to be more about me or us and more self-serving. And I'm not saying happiness is bad, don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that the joy and the significance is better. So here's just a quick quote. I'm not going to read the quotes on the screen today, but my book is filled with quotes. I can't even tell you how many quotes are throughout the book, but I really try to borrow the thoughts and ideas of all these brilliant minds throughout the centuries that are so much more brilliant than I am, and kind of share those, as Christy said, in kind of a newly repackaged way. So here's the next poll question. Leaders that you admire. So go into menti.com. You already typed in the code, so you could just type in leaders' names who you admire, and you'll see them pop up. And as you're doing that, I'll just play a song, so it's not dead air or me talking.
Broken down and tired of living life on the merry-go-round. You can't find a fighter, but I see it in you, so we gon' walk it out. Ooh, mountain, we gon' walk it out. And mountain. And I'll rise like the day, I'll rise up. All right, so some common names here. I know who said Brene Brown. I think Mr. Harkis probably said Vince Lombardi. A lot of these names are mentioned in my book, people that I certainly admire immensely. So, you know, I would just say that many times when I ask people to define leadership, and they struggle with that, and I ask that question to every person I've interviewed in the last at least 10 years, it'd be amazing how many job candidates struggle with that question. Now I'll say, well, think of a leader who you admire, and then backtrack from there some of the characteristics. So the last one here, definition of leadership, and then I will dive into my leadership model. So thank you for that. This one's a little bit more difficult. It's not a select one or pick a name. It's really thinking more deeply about what leadership is. So I appreciate your feedback there. So my to lead is to love model. You know, I know most people, when they think of leadership, they don't think of love, or at least love isn't the first word that comes to mind when you think of leadership. But again, reflecting back on the most effective and impactful leaders throughout the course of time, really that has been a common theme. And there's people who get things done in a day, and there's certain leaders who accomplish certain things in the short term. But I'm talking about longevity, and I'm talking about really living and leading that legacy. And it's leading the right way. Can you accomplish things through being a
authoritative, draconian leader. You certainly can, right? We've seen that throughout history. But I also think that there's a better, kinder way that people really admire more, and that's more effective for the long term. So I'm going to just dive into what love means, and this is really my definition of leadership over the years. And I'm going to step through them each within the time remaining. But you can see that LOVE is an acronym for learning and teaching, having an optimistic attitude, having a vision, which is based on your core foundational values, and then engagement. So at the end of the day, it's all about people and relationships. And I feel like if you're an effective leader, you need all four of these components. And if one is neglected, you're just not going to be as successful to the masses. So let's dive in here. So the first one is learning and teaching. So again, you can read some of these quotes at your leisure, but if you think about it, I don't know any effective leader who is not a reader. So I like to say that all readers aren't leaders necessarily, but all great leaders are readers. So as a part of that, learning is about staying relevant. It's about sharpening the saw. It could be reading, podcasts, continuous with your schooling, experimental learning, all of that in one, just to be very intentional and set the example for people that you're always trying to improve, right? As Carol Dweck talked about, the continuous growth mindset. That's really critical, especially with the pace of change and innovation today, that if we are not evolving and improving, we could become really irrelevant quickly. And then on the flip side, right, by setting that example, it's, are we giving back to others? Are we teaching others and sharing with others what we're learning? So it's not just about ourselves, it's about the team. Are we setting the bar, inspiring others to learn and grow? And as a team, we're going to either succeed or we're going to fail. So really it's evolving from that me to we mentality again, learning about me, teaching about we, but all leaders try to create that learning ethic or learning culture in the organization. So the next component is having an optimistic attitude. I really don't know of one successful entrepreneur ever that was a pessimist. It seems like anyone who's creative or anyone who's very innovative, they tend to see the glass as half full, or for the engineers, they see the glass as half as big as what it needs to be. But it's really having that mindset again, right? There's been a ton of studies. We probably know more about the brain in the last 5 to 10 years than we ever had in the time preceding that. However, we understand the mind-body connection unlike ever before. And a lot of the mind and brain, which are actually two separate things, believe it or not, are really setting the tone for everything else. But we're learning that the physicality is also impacting the mind and the brain. But everything, really starts with our thinking. And when we're going to change and evolve, whether it be individuals or as an organization, and as we lead our organizations or lead our families, this isn't all about companies and organizations. As a reminder, this is about leading ourselves, leading our families, leading our communities. It's beyond ourselves. But in order to change, we need to evolve our thinking. In order to change, we need to find how to move forward and not regress. We need to focus on how do we accomplish things together, right? Versus be complacent with the status quo and just be okay with the way we've always done things. And as leaders, we need to not be cynical, not be sarcastic. We need to be setting that tone and creating that environment so our employees, our colleagues, our family members, etc., can grow and thrive and change. So again, it all comes down to then influencing others positively to move forward and progress. So the next component, the V within the L.O.V.E acronym, the V is really for two words, vision and values. And I feel like all great leaders, they need to be forward thinking. They need to have an inspirational vision. People need to be working for an organization or being a part of any team that they feel is meaningful, that it's purposeful. It's beyond just doing what you're told, receiving a paycheck. And that vision must be rooted in core values, right? It's the character element. There's not a lot of people that are necessarily inspired to work for an organization that goes rogue, that's doing things the wrong way, focusing on unethical practices, that's trying to scheme people. You know, and most of us are good. I fully believe that most of us in our hearts are good. And if that in fact is the case, we as leaders, we need to lead for the future based on those core solid values. They say most people leave an organization, or they join an organization. Why do they join an organization? It's more than just the salary and the paycheck, right? Many times they are inspired by what the company does and the meaning and the value it provides. But why do people normally leave organizations? They tend to leave because of their boss. So think of that for those of us who are bosses, that we don't want people leaving us because of the way that we act and the way that we treat others in the wrong ways. So the E in L.O.V.E is for engagement. So this is really about engaging people. And you engage people, you form relationships with people. Life is all about people. Life would be pretty boring if it was just us as individuals on a desert island. So in order to engage people, what do you need to do? One, again, foundationally, you need to establish and build that trust. They say that it takes time to build trust. People need to get to know you and get exposed to you and observe you and see if your actions and your words match. And once that trust is established, we know that many times it only takes one small transgression, mistake, to basically unwind all that trust and all that time that was built. So this is why specifically as leaders, we have to just be very cautious of what we do and what we say, because if we're going to jeopardize the trust with the people around us, our colleagues, that everything else becomes really a moot point. So, you know, I say every interaction with a person, it's a trust building exercise. And that person walks away from that interaction probably either trusting you more or trusting you less. There is no neutral, I feel. You're making an impression with every conversation, every communication that you send. So being an effective communicator, especially as you move up through the ranks, is critically important, because you are under a microscope and people misconstrue things or think you said something where you might have intended to say something very differently. So being very intentional and particular with what you communicate is critical as a leader. What many times gets missed in the realm of communication is listening. And many of us have taken communication classes, speech classes, been a part of Toastmasters International, have learned how to be more effective. They say communicators, it's really speakers or presenters, but there's probably very few of us that have ever taken a class on how to be a more effective listener, and creating that understanding and that empathy and the techniques to be a better listener. And even for those of us that have maybe read a book or two on that, or have taken a course on listening, we don't practice it very often, or unless you have a really good life partner or a life coach that is giving you that feedback, that direct feedback. Many times we feel we're much better listeners than what we really are, but I don't want to discount that. So around engaging people, right? It's being an effective communicator. It's in being a good communicator builds trust, having strong morals and ethics. It's all very, very important to create these really solid relationships. But then again, at the end of the day, it's a leader. And think of yourselves and ask yourself the question, are you filling up people's buckets, or are you dipping from their buckets? When they walk away from an interaction, do they feel better about themselves and who they are, or do they feel worse about themselves and who they are? And I personally struggle with that. I admit I am far from perfect, and I am growing and learning every day in this area. But also think as a leader, are you a builder, or are you a driver? Are you really just pushing people, demanding, just high expectations? There's no excuses for not doing what you're told in a certain way? Or do you try to build people up? Do you try to give them a very clear expectation of this is what I'm looking for, and then let them wow you with how they do it? Let them be creative and complete the task or activity the way that they feel is best. So really this also involves, kind of back to the teaching element, is great leaders do tend to be great coaches, great teachers. But right, you have to have those people skills to be able to relate to people. And this is very critical. So there's really two maxims that I mention in my book after I walk through the complete leadership model that I really want everyone to take away from the book, because this isn't just about leadership, it's about life. And I make an argument that we're all leaders at some capacity, regardless of the title, regardless of our age or experience, that we lead in different areas. But the golden rule, everyone probably can recite the golden rule by heart. Many of us learned it, growing up from our parents or other adults. But the golden rule, to me, really could be refined a bit, because some of us don't want to be treated exactly the same as someone else. That we are unique individuals, and we all have unique wants and needs and sensitivities. So think of it maybe as do unto others as they would do unto themselves. And in order to do that as a leader, that means you need to get to know your people. And you need to know what motivates them, what fire is really needed to inspire them. I can make an argument that there is no such thing as motivation, because the only motivation comes from within. The individual can only motivate themselves, but a leader can inspire the individual to be motivated. But it's really treating the person as they would want to be treated. the reason I love the golden rule so much is because the common core values about wanting to be loved, wanting to be appreciated, wanting to be respected, showing that dignity and tact and diplomacy with people, for the most part, regardless of your culture, regardless of your religious affiliation, if you have one, this is a common teaching throughout. And I think it's just very, very powerful. And honestly, I feel like if all of us did better to practice the golden rule each and every day, this world would be a completely different place for the better. And then the second one is the serenity prayer. So this is really, I would say, less about a prayer. I don't want to turn off anyone here, but it's really more about change. And this is about making choices. So we tend to ruminate and drive ourselves nuts and make ourselves, some of us, mentally ill around ruminating on things we have no control over. And that makes us, some of us, go absolutely crazy, and it's very unproductive. Rumination is completely unproductive. But we have to understand and have the courage then to know what we can change. And then the end of the serenity prayer finishes up with then having the wisdom to know the difference. So accepting what we can't change and just let it go, changing the things we can change and should change, and having that wisdom to know the difference. And this applies to so many different things in life, personally and professionally. So with that, I am going to ask for your feedback, because I believe that in order for me to grow and improve, I need feedback. Without feedback, there is no learning. Without learning, there is no growth and improvement. So I really appreciate your time. I wanted to go through this at a very high level and just expose you to some of the elements within the book. One thing I would encourage you to do is, if there's anything here that struck a chord with you, that you're interested in, it's a very short read. I wanted to write a book, my first book. I'm actually writing a second book as we speak. But my first book, I wanted to be short. You could take it on a trip, read it one setting on an airline. I want it to be 120 pages or less. Use examples, but not with excruciating detail that people get lost in. I know that we're all super busy. Our attention spans are all probably dwindling or not where they should be. But I just think that people would find it of value. I wrote the book, one, for a selfish reason, because I've always wanted to do it and learn and grow and become a better writer and just go through that journey. But most importantly, I wanted to share that wisdom and knowledge that I found the most insightful over the last 2 decades, specifically around these areas, with others in a very simplistic, easy to follow format. So I hope that you find it of value. And, Christy, if you want to open it up, if anyone has any questions for me, I would absolutely love to hear.
If anyone, feel free to chat in your questions, or since we do have a smaller group, Aaron, if you're okay with it, if anyone wants to unmute and share their question. Or a comment, maybe something that really resonated with you.
And now I'm reading the chats, because when I was presenting, I wasn't able to read the chats.
Aaron, I really appreciate it. I have a lot of notes jotted down here, but I love the whole idea around, this hour really, right, wasn't just about leadership, it's about life, and that how we can apply these practices, at work, in our professional lives, with our families, with our friends. as you were talking, I kept on thinking about how this, right, extends across just all of my relationships and how important it is. So thank you so much. This was absolutely fantastic. We have a question from Jessica. How do you ask others for that feedback of who you are and how others perceive you? Great question, Jessica.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic question. And you know, it depends. Do you think that person's going to give you honest feedback, or do you think that person's going to tell you what you want to hear? And especially when in a work setting, if you're asking those questions to people at lower levels, many times people don't feel comfortable with giving you that candid or constructive feedback. I once worked for a boss for almost 5 years, and I absolutely loved the guy, but he could never, ever give me any constructive feedback. And I would ask him all the time, and he was so uncomfortable giving anything, you know, negative. And I'm just thinking, just one thing I could work on, you know, because he knew some of my career goals and whatnot. But, you know, sometimes, you know, if you have that, again, that real trust and rapport with the individual, and they feel comfortable enough that they can be honest with you, those are the colleagues upward and downward in the chain that I've always valued the most, because they would be the ones that would help me grow and improve. And after a while, you kind of know the ones even to stop asking, because the feedback that they give is just almost like flattery. And although flattery many times makes us feel good at the moment, many times it doesn't do us that justice. You know, the other tool that I've leveraged and advocated over the years, and some people don't believe in it, but it's just that kind of anonymous 360-degree feedback mechanism. And I've used that throughout my career and have found that very, very helpful. And some people tend to be more honest in those settings where it's just not that direct one-on-one feedback. But I would highly recommend for anyone to leverage both.
Chris, you there?
Hey, Dan. Yep, I can hear you.
Yes. How do you balance leading with love and also facing a very short deadline that you have to get things done? And many times it's considered love when you're pressing, you know, the employee to get his work done, and you know that he can get it done, and you've set the example, but you know that they're not doing everything they can or as committed to the mission as you are. So how do you, I guess, put a little fire under these people with love?
Yeah. Yeah, kill them with kindness, but not literally kill them. You know, I think it's an excellent question, because, you know, the one thing I didn't touch upon, but it's so important, is, you know, your leadership style has to be adaptable. You just can't always be like, you know, the nice guy giving the compliments, you know, being super energetic and inspirational, but yet if there's some low performers, kind of ignoring that, or you don't see any difference in their behaviors and their work product, that, you know, you need to treat people differently, because people are different and people's circumstances are different. And you should be spending more time with your highest performers than your lowest performers. You shouldn't let, you know, the squeaky wheel consume all of your time, and then you start neglecting your best performers, and then they're not feeling the love or appreciation, and then they end up leaving the organization. And yet I've seen so many leaders do just that they're trying to to fix these problems in firefighting every day or working with the lowest performers, that they're not taking the time to step back and focus on the bigger picture. So like in your example, it's in a high stressful environment. It's, by the end of the week or by the end of the month, you're hitting a critical deadline, or there's a project that's about to go live with a lot of risk and a lot of complexity, that, there's some times that you just have to be very direct with people of what the expectations are and what the priorities are. And if people aren't getting it, sometimes it's just you're not being an effective communicator, or you have to change your communication style and set those directives. But I will say that, and there's so many of these leadership gurus that talk about this, that 80% of businesses fail because of leadership's lack of and poor communication. But a lot of that is setting the priorities, being extremely clear and concise with your expectations, and then holding them accountable. And it's not just waiting until a quarterly or annual review to give them that type of feedback. We need to be spending more time with our leaders so that they're more effective, or with our individual contributors to make sure that, they're not just meeting your expectations, but they're meeting hopefully their expectations as far as levels of performance. I don't know if that helped, Dan.
Yes, it does. Let me ask you one more. Would you consider Bezos an effective leader? He had problems with Amazon because of his leadership. Certainly by some of his employees, and also by the stockholders. Many times he wanted to reinvest in the company, and they wanted, of course, to get more out of the stock that they invested in. But he stuck with his guns and pretty much ignored everyone. And he led by his own personal motivation about what he saw as building Amazon. So would you consider him to be an effective leader, or is that a good model for us to follow or not?
Yeah, I should say that, my mother told me, and I learned from church, that I shouldn't be the one judging anyone. That I'm going to be judged one day probably, but that's from someone at a much higher level. But
Okay.
I could just give you some high level thoughts. And I think of Bezos, and I think of Elon Musk as another extremely innovative, brilliant individuals. You can't argue with these massive companies, and again, how you define success may be different, but the success of these companies and how impactful they've been and made on the world, we're also not looking for perfection. From what I've heard, the only person that ever set foot on the earth who is perfect, we ended up executing him. So, neither one of those leaders are perfect individuals. They have a lot of very positive traits, but they've also have a lot of things that I think they need to work on. Do I feel like they're humble leaders, servant leaders? Probably not, but they have a unique style. They surround themselves by smart people. I think there's people that work for them that manage their businesses and their organizations very differently. But I guess at that level, say, well, what is the objective set forth for them? And of course, they're at the mercy of the shareholders in Wall Street, and some of Musk's companies are, some are still private. But regardless, it's really, I judge leadership with how they lead. And unless I spend time with them and observe them personally, I just struggle with judging anyone, because I just know as much as what we all learn and read from the news and the journalists.
Fair enough.
Aaron, I was wondering if you could talk to us maybe a little bit about like the concept of managing up, and if we are perhaps maybe working with other leaders that don't share some of these principles of servant leadership as we do, how do we navigate that when we appreciate our work and our organization?
Yeah, I should write a whole book about managing up and my successes and failures of that. And that's very tricky. And going through a master's of business program, I can't tell you that anyone has ever said, here, follow this script and this will work in all circumstances, and here's how you do that. These are all the soft skills that many times they don't teach you in business school. That's why I think many times a letters and science background is so critical, because it teaches you some of these other skills that you don't get in business and engineering, etc. But really, it's more of an art than a science, and it comes down to, again, understanding people, understanding people's motives, and it's that psychology of after working for someone for a while, you know what their hot buttons are, things that you can't be open and honest with because it's a trigger for them, that you're going to be ripped and penalized in a performance review, later that year because of maybe something you said. And that's happened to me several times in my career, that you hit all your goals, hit all your metrics. You said one thing in a meeting or in a one-on-one one time, and that's what shows up in your performance review. Thinking, how could this be? A part of it is just being more mature, being more observant to those things, but then also trying to, at least initially, when you start forming a new relationship with any new boss or a higher up, of sometimes just asking them, what's negotiable, what's non-negotiable, what's off limits versus what are some things that could change. And sometimes when I approached it that way, I would have a boss that would be honest with me and just said, you know what, for these reasons, don't touch that topic. You need to focus on other big things, or for these reasons, it's not going to change, or that's, someone, it could be the CEO's, baby or thing that they're just holding on to, that they don't even want to discuss the topic. So, I think it's just really kind of navigating the waters and the people and the relationships and who knows who. And, I don't mean to sound like it's manipulative, but it's just better understanding kind of the landscape and people's motives and some of the history and the backstory. And once you have that, I think you can be more effective to lead up, and always pitching it as not about me and not about my organization, or not, is always kind of pitching it as far as, well, this is what it's going to do to make you look better, even though you probably wouldn't tell someone that, or make them more successful, or help them meet their performance metrics if you're talking to your boss. I think the more noble thing is to tie it in with the mission and the objectives of what the organization is shooting for, and if you could craft it that way. So to me, it's kind of good change management, right? The what's in it for them, what's in it for me thing. So I don't know, Christy, if that's helpful.
Absolutely, thank you.
Sure.
This whole hour has been helpful, Aaron. I really appreciate you just spending time to share, again, some of the nuggets from your book with us today. We're almost to the hour. Does anyone have any final questions? Leave that opportunity open. Well, as I mentioned, we have recorded this session, so we will go ahead and send it out with the group. Oh yeah, thanks. I agree, the serenity prayer. When Aaron touched on that, I thought, oh, that's my baby. When I'm up at night ruminating, sometimes the serenity prayer is what gets me to sleep. So I appreciated that one as well. And once again, Aaron, thank you so much for dedicating your time to all of us today and sharing all of your insights. Extremely valuable information. I have a lot to take in here and revisit on my notes, and have to go back to the book again. A wonderful book, Love to Lead. It's hard to see with my background, but it's a beautiful cover and a wonderful image, just like some of the amazing images that Aaron shared at the beginning in the video. So you can certainly check it out on Amazon.com. Aaron, thank you again. We appreciate you very much.
Thank you all guys for your time today, and for putting up with me. And you're all, you know, beautiful souls. You're all perfect in your own way, and just remember that. And you know, go now forward, and you know, lead that legacy and write that narrative that you want to leave behind. Thank you.
Great closing. Love that. Thanks again, Aaron, and congratulations on your book success.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Bye.